Go ahead, Kinshal.
Okay, okay. Hi, good afternoon. A warm welcome to everybody present today. We begin with yet another of our sessions. This time, again, it's Faculty of Design and it's Masters in Design and Interior Design programs. We have with us Paramdeep Singh, who's going to begin with the session and he's going to introduce us to the program, followed by a couple of projects, which is going to be discussed by the students. Paramdeep, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. So the studio was named the Big Rethink. It focuses on interior techniques and interior design practices. It was in Masters in Interior Design L4 Studio, where this had a very sort of a different approach in terms of structuring compared to the other general studios, where we had a master tutor, Kirit Patel, and then there were a couple of tutors, Rishav Jain and Aparajita Basu, leading the team, where me and Shell were assisting them. And the studio was, due to administrative requirements, was split into two groups. But the overall studio had a general and a common brief, which everybody followed. And then the group one was led by Rishav sir, and the group two by Aparajita ma'am. And throughout the studio, the intention was to develop a multitude of argument. So the studio was predominantly divided into two modules, and this studio is built on the premise of building an argumentative design position and testing it through a design context, where the relationship between interior techniques and practices can be focused on the base of expressions, identities, and design outcomes. The By the end of the studio unit, the student will be able to develop a systematic argument or a position or an approach on interdependence between interior technique and practices. Also will be able to translate or represent the desired arguments through three-dimensional and material based outcomes, and also organize and evaluate the programmatic and pragmatic potential of derived design positions with an ability to build a design vocabulary. The overall studio was for, had a premise of interior techniques, which was defined as a method, tool, and a medium that modifies, alters, conceals, or exposes an interior element through transforming the transformable qualities of the space. And this being a master's studio, the overall approach was a theory based design approach, and where the design process is seen as a uh, important outcome rather than it just being the part of the overall project. And so the overall semester pondered upon what is an exact role of an interior designer. So we had also a different approach, where generally a studio would have one project which is run through across the semester, but we had a single premise and had three different projects following the same premise. And again, we had one module, but we had like three different mediums of representation, again focusing on their skills of how to actually depict their design processes. And then in the previous module, where like there will be one argument where which will be depicted in three different roles by an individual student in a design process. The overall schedule of the semester, where the initial 4 weeks are a common foundation program, where three different fields of interior design, building products and services, and furniture design students come together for 4 weeks and go through two different exercises named objectory and factory, where objectory is about understanding how the materials and construction works, and factory is a more of a practical understanding of materials. Then the later part of the studio for interior design is divided into largely two modules, where the first module was for them to generate an argument based on several case studies and matrices, where the second module was again divided into three different roles, where they had to go through different projects, which they will be eventually sharing with you in detail. Um, But briefly talking about it, the role one was an adaptive reuse of an existing historical site, where the output type was photomontages focusing on the experimental and ephemeral qualities. And the role two was an standardized typical office floor plan intervention, where the output was an orthographic drawings focusing on organization and planning of the projects. And the role three, the project type was an independent design with a avant-garde sort of an approach, with the project with no predominant site context, more or less you can say a hypothetical situation, where the output type was sectional perspective, isometric and axonometric drawings, focusing on the making and the detailing of the projects. Now I will ask Apurva to take forward and share her project. Over to you, Apurva.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Apurva Pandey. I would like to walk you through my project, The Seamless Parasite. The initial project of the Foundation Studio was objectory and factory exercise that helps us understand the design details of the object, how its parts and components come together. The Foundation Studio is also involved in planning of making. It developed an eye for precision, tolerance, and accuracy. My argument states that the fusion of elements could alter the volumetric dimension of a form. This was derived from the case studies that we studied. The interior techniques used were different elements create rhythm in the space, modularity of elements, repetition of elements, volumetric interplay. So in project one, can you go next? The chosen site was Milona's Association building, wherein the design is translated through photo montages. I'm trying to translate the argument by breaking the larger volume of the site and introducing volumes that make multiple exhibition spaces, and at the same time intervening with the vertical facades fins with a bigger cube that forms the exhibit. The small element goes up to form a ceiling, comes down to form a vertical element that divides the space. I'm also trying to intervene with the columns of the existing site. So, to start with, how I went about with the concept. So, one module fuses to form different interior elements of a space. So, I'm doing it in two ways, by vertical stacking and by vertical staggering of the modules. Also, horizontal stacking of the modules by addition and subtraction from the larger module. So now, according to the program, a vertical element fuses to form a seating, a ceiling fuses to form a railing, and sometimes a vertical element fuses to form a flooring or a display unit for the machines. So the module that I'm using is a cube, which is a 200 by 200 mm. I'm using a combination of wood and brass for the modules, wherein the typology is of three types. A cube is in plywood, a hollow cube, which is in MS bar, and a combination of semi-solid and semi-hollow, and thus developing three permutation combinations from these modules. Moving on to project 2, designing interior spaces through plans and sections in a standardization project. The design focuses on a single module that forms different elements in creating a visually seamless flow. By creating a series of voids or carved out spaces in an exhibition, where visitors fully experience the structure as it moves through the space, wherein the modules, like a parasite, grow along the existing beams, the periphery of the site. The entire space is designed in such a way that a single module repeats itself to form an organic form. In certain spaces, I use these permutations combinations to visually connect or disconnect. When one passes by the corridor alongside the site, gets a glimpse of the exhibition space inside, the modules expose the interiors through the pockets of openings. Also, the double height space that takes one to the floor above has smaller floor cutouts that forms display and visually connects you to the floor below. Now moving to the project 3, using the opportunity of a siteless interiors to its potential by introducing volumes through series of pods. These create multiple exhibition spaces. The smaller pod houses 2 to 3 machines, whereas the larger pod caters to more than 3 machines. Each pod is visually connected to the core of the space where the larger, which is the larger volume and where the largest machine sits. Each pod is visually connected to the core of the space. Moving from the periphery of the structure towards the central space, the material palette becomes lighter and more open, inviting visitors to interact with the space and the machines. While it is a primary guiding mechanism, the structure fuses to form a source of light that hangs from the same module on the ceiling. Machine display sits on terrazzo flooring, which fuses to form a vertical element, creating a backdrop for the display. An envelope is introduced in the space, which covers the interiors from the top and follows the same language of the interior space, which acts as a ceiling. So, I would like to conclude by saying that the journey is a constant contradiction between enclosed to open, dark to light, and delicate to massive. So, this is how an attempt is made to translate my argument to these three projects. Thank you. Janvi will take over from here.
Yeah, thank you, Apurva. So, good afternoon, everyone. The title of my project is Da Vinci's Illusion Forest. So, my project revolves around the poetry of wooden lattices. So, the illusion forest is designed in a way that it portrays the perception of carved out spaces having continuous elements. The key idea in all the three roles revolve around exploring various techniques to achieve assembly and disassembly of elements. So, as Apurva explained for the objectory factory, my takeaway from objectory factory was that how assembly and disassembly of elements come together to form an object and to make it functional. So the 9 case studies that we did, out of which one was by Virmuller Architects called Woodwalk Studio. It also explored on the same plane called assembly and disassembly of elements, in which the entire interior could be assembled and disassembled on the same site and can be used somewhere else. So the argument that I derived was flexibility in space at planar and volume level can be achieved by assembly and disassembly of elements. So for the first project, can we go next? So for the first project, my site was mill owner's building, in which the entire journey was planned in a way that from the entrance to the exit, one can sense the flexibility of elements, not only at planar level, but at volume level, in which all the elements can be assembled and disassembled. The entire space was designed to display 15 dream machines for school students that will function for 6 hours a day. For the second project, the same argument was explored in depth by experimenting with modules that were 600 by 600 in size. And in order to form the assembly and disassembly of elements, the stacking and interlocking of the elements has been adopted for the design. Oriku is a very traditional Japanese joinery in which all the joineries come together without the use of nails, and alternate staggering of components create an element with form that acts as ceiling, column, partition as a whole. So all the modules that come together, and there is no bifurcation of any specific element, but all the elements come together to form whole as a component. The flooring here has been kept a homogeneous constant one, that is concrete, that complements with the existing facade, as well as concentrate and focus on the elements. The little gap towards the glass windows tries to act as balance between the elements and machines. This continuity creates a journey with seamless yet interesting experience. Each component is executed in different sections that repeats in order to achieve organic form. These elements are placed in such a manner that they create an organic circulation for all the users. For the project 3, this module was staggered in a different manner, but the entire project experiments with different sizes and materials of similar kind of module. So the project experiments with the envelope that is 1/3 submerged underground, while the 2/3 floats above the ground, in which the transition in the space is a woven journey that interacts with the user through various form of elements. The two double height spaces gives an opportunity to experiment the elements with larger volume, and thus the interaction with inside and outside of the site performs different roles of porosity and transparency. The space is designed in similar way with a carved out space and having continuous elements. Here the as we can see in the perspective section, the alternate staggering of different materials create the porosity at different level. For example, at the eye level, the project seems very light and very open, whereas the double height spaces has a various kind of massing that helps to suspend the dream machines. So yeah, now I will hand over to Isha. Thank you.
Thank you, Janvi. Good afternoon, everyone. My project is altering perception. The concept is to break the geometry of the existing space by adding a new geometry or form. The goal is to maximize the quality of the site in a functional and analytical way, along with incorporating the aesthetic values which with the help of interior techniques and material techniques. According to the space understanding, the argument programs the space such that it creates an experience for the user. Furthermore, to bring out the quality of the space, human scale along with proportion and response of senses are worked on together. My argument states that adding contrasting interior elements in form changes the perception of the existing space. To derive the argument, various build projects are examined in different categories. In both these projects, I have analyzed how adding a different form can break its existing structural geometry and change the perception of the existing space. The project focuses on understanding the quality of existing site and alter the visual perception by inserting new space-making elements through volumetric play, multifunctionality of element, variation in form and geometry, play of light, movement in space, and achieving visual connection. For project 1, that is expression of argument through photo montages, the attempt is to intervene something new without altering the existing essence of the structure. The site chosen is industrial ruins. Contrast is added by breaking the space into smaller units, which alter the linearity and fixed volume of the space. Movement is achieved by connecting all the smaller units through each other, which creates a circulation pattern in the space. A single material, that is wood, translates itself as the entryway, partition, flooring, ceiling, and furniture. Also, paint on wood gives a finished look to the structure, which brings out the contrast between old and new. The focus is to create a different experience in every unit for the user. Moving on to project 2, that is expression of argument through space planning. The aim is to create a new experience inside a standardized structure without modifying any structural element. Contrasting interior elements are intervened to break the volumetric perception by altering the existing cuboidal volume. The new geometry is achieved by defying the movement of the existing grid. Can we go to the next slide? The first interior decision taken is to utilize the negative spaces created by the cylindrical units into display areas and sitting areas. Furthermore, a single enclosed cylindrical unit is transformed as the walking area, sitting area, and the ceiling. Also, concrete finish and exposed mesh walls are used to showcase raw materiality, which creates a contrast between the finished existing structure and new intervention. Next slide, please. The exposed mesh gives a visual clue to the user, creating a sense of curiosity. The circulation from one unit to another breaks the rigid geometry of the cuboid and creates a free-flowing movement in the space. Can we go to the next sheet? Taking the intervention and design principle forward, in project 3, expression of argument through 3D drawings, the aim is to modify the cylindrical units into new geometry, keeping the basic circular shape constant. The cylindrical units are modified into spherical shells. These spherical units are of different proportions and are connected at different levels to create volumetric plane in the space. The movement within the space is the first design decision taken. I've tried to create different levels inside a single spherical unit to emphasize on vertical movement and break the volume of the structure in smaller sections. Also, double height areas are introduced to break the visual barriers and create curiosity for the user for what is coming next. Can we go to the next slide? Cement board flooring and perforated metal sheets are used in the interior, which contrast the envelope. The entire structure is worked out of space frame to achieve the desired form and intervention. The goal is to achieve the form without introducing any column or beam to avoid any hindrance in the intervention. The envelope is worked on the principle of geodesic dome made out of space frame, which also supports the slabs inside. The floor slabs are suspended through cables from the spheres, and both the space frames are joined together on the edges to maximize the stability. Artificial light is, uh, Artificial light is being used to enhance the experience inside the space. The focus of the light is the dream machines and the circulation part to guide the user. The lights are installed in such a way that it falls on the machine and creates a light and shadow effect on the floor. Can we go to the next sheet? The material palette is kept monochromatic to highlight the machines and play with light and shadow. The design focuses on creating a different experience on each level using modern day practices. Thank you. So now Hitasini will take over from here.
Thank you, Isha. So the Big Rethink Studio began with understanding of what is an interior technique by examining various built projects. The major outcome is how each designer handle the threshold spaces in their projects, how they choreograph the interior environment, and what meaning they impose. So based on this, the argument is developed. It states the modulation in form of the threshold at any transaction point between two interior environments gives visual clue about the upcoming space. It can also affect how users capture the spatial sequence and predict what happens in and around. In the first project, the Milonos building, the site itself has a very strong threshold. The original space is very much retained and a new contemporary layer of value and consequence is added. Design solutions provided by responding to existing strong threshold and modulation of introduced planes, which informs about the next phase. In the second project, I have introduced forms and elements that induces continuous momentum around the museum through different zones. The dream machines are placed along this momentum. The physical and visual threshold in the horizontal plane is enhanced through sequence of arches. The perspectives has been manipulated by diminishing the arches. Thus, the journey is exaggerated and the focal point is made more clear. The visual threshold in the vertical plane is made through periscopes that deliver a sense of simultaneity with deep vistas of the object crossing multiple levels. These periscopes are technical thresholds and it makes the museum interactive. The material palette chosen sorry, the material palette chosen based on its
तुम्हारी सब चीजें परफेक्ट है क्या ये कार्ड नहीं चला तुम्हारा yes continue Hitasini sorry
yeah, no problem. The material palette chosen based on its property of how it responds to light, its visibility, and the weight. In the third project, the thresholds are not only explored as an entity like doors and fenestration, but also as a temporal space that prepares us to look forward for what is ahead and as a psychological space that become a reminder of things already experienced. Next slide, please. It is analyzed through various aspects of thresholds like delimiters, geometry, sequence, topography, furnishings, and materiality. The design details were also developed with an experimentation of the materials and the spatial sequence. An envelope is developed that complements the interior design decision. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you.
It. This is all that we had to share. Can I stop sharing, Kinjima?
Yes, are we done here,
Yeah,
Paramdeep?
we are done. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. That was quick and definitely a lot of projects that together just put up the entire program. Thank you, Paramdeep, for coordinating everything. Thank you,
Sure.
students, for sharing your work. And we definitely want everybody to, explore exhibition.cep.ac.in. Our winter exhibition is up there. These projects are just a few in number that, we could accommodate today. But please have a look and enjoy the tour. Thank you so much, students. Thank you, participants. Thank you, guests. Bye bye.